Welcome to The Pulse, Metro Detroit's only nightly political talk show. I'm Roop Raj. We may be heading into a holiday weekend, but there is so much news happening at this hour. Joining us in studio in just a few minutes here, Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Troy Mayor Ethan Baker to talk about the D.C. shakeup and other moves by the administration. And then AI expert talking about the crackdown on deepfake porn here in Michigan and the protections for people the governor has signed off on. But we begin with the president's crackdown on crime and illegal immigration. His federal takeover in D.C. has been met with both praise as well as protests. And soon we could see the National Guard and other federal agents in the Windy City. The president planning on extending that effort to Chicago, including sending hundreds of Homeland Security officers to a naval base just outside the city of Chicago to support immigration enforcement. Chicago leaders say the White House has not been in direct contact with them about the government's plans. The effort in Chicago could start as early as next week and last for at least 30 days.
President invading an American city with troops. We always need help fighting crime, of course, and would love more help doing that, but not troops.
Only 1% of the country says crime is not a problem in our nation's major cities. Think about that for a second. Democrats have chosen a 1% issue.
Other cities the president has mentioned as possible focuses of crackdowns: New York and Baltimore. In the meantime, back to D.C. for a moment to take a look at some big numbers here. According to the Joint Task Force District of Columbia, violent crime in D.C. dropped nearly 60% during a one-week span amid President Trump's federal law enforcement crackdown. They say carjackings are actually down 60% and robberies are down 56%. The task force says it's also handling a request to increase National Guard presence at metro stations as the school year kicks off. As of Wednesday, 2,258 guardsmen were deployed across the district. Experts with the Center for New American Security telling CNN the crackdown in D.C. is costing around $1 million a day. That's including troops and things like travel, food, housing, and other logistical efforts. You know, we say it time and time again, this show is all about you, and we mean that when we say that. We want to know what you think about all of this. Lots of you sending us your comments about this issue right now. In fact, we got hundreds of comments. We'll begin here. Phil says, absolutely. If the local law can't take care of it, what's so bad about getting a little help? Carol says, if they can't control the violence, welcome the authorities. I'd be happy if there were more authorities controlling the violence. Rita, thanks for writing in. You say, no, he should give the states back money that he has taken away so they hire more officers. We do not need troops in our streets. This is not about crime. It's about him trying to intimidate the leaders of the cities and states. And Jay, thanks for writing in as well. You say, hey, it costs more to do that than provide temporary housing, work rehab programs, and food for the homeless. Our priorities are so backwards here. We also posted a non-scientific poll on our site to see what people think about expanding the crackdown efforts in other parts of the country. Right now, as you see over here, most of you, the overwhelming majority, 76%, say, nope, I don't want that. I'm against that. If you disagree or agree, you want to weigh in, just go ahead and click on that QR code on your screen. We'd love to hear from you. You can vote right there. And sticking with immigration crackdown for a moment, the Trump administration is proposing a new rule that would basically put a cap on how long international students can study in our country. Right now, foreign students with an F visa can stay in the country for the duration of their studies, but the White House is looking to limit that to 4 years. Federal data shows there were roughly 1.6 million international students on F visas in the U.S. in 2024. Well, he's become sort of a face of the president's immigration crackdown efforts in some ways. And now lawyers for Kilmar Abrego Garcia are requesting a gag order in their case, citing concerns over the possibility of a fair trial in his human smuggling case out in Tennessee. Garcia's attorneys say Trump administration officials keep attacking him with prejudicial and false statements and are now requesting people like Attorney General Pam Bondi and Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem be ordered to hold back their comments. You'll remember Garcia made international headlines when he was wrongfully deported to El Salvador, then brought back to the U.S. Garcia is accused of being a gang member who took part in human smuggling, but his attorneys say he's a family man who's been used by the administration for political purposes. The Trump administration is now eyeing Uganda as a place to deport him to. Well, staying with the Trump administration for a moment, this evening a federal appeals court ruled the president had no legal right to declare national emergencies and impose sweeping tariffs on various countries around the world. Today's ruling largely upholding a May decision by a trade court in New York. However, the appeals court didn't strike down the tariffs immediately, leaving them in place for now so his administration can appeal to the Supreme Court. In the meantime, a tariff loophole that allowed cheaper imports to the U.S. has been closed. The exemption, known as de minimis, was ended by the Trump administration overnight. It previously allowed shipments under $800 or less to enter the U.S. tax-free. Now those shipments are subject to taxes that could range anywhere from 10 to 50% of their declared value for the next 6 months. So basically, if you order from sites like Amazon, eBay, and Etsy, you could pay just a little bit more. With the exemption ending, at least 24 countries have suspended shipments to the United States. The Trump administration says the loophole closing is actually helpful, and it helps make the nation less independent on foreign goods. And he says also prevents dangerous goods from entering the United States.
Has happened with the de minimis threshold is it is allowing a flood of low value product into the country. And some of this product is turning out to be unsafe, non-compliant with existing mandatory standards in the United States, or even illegal.
If you're wondering just how big of an impact that loophole did have, U.S. Customs and Border Protection says it was processing 4 million de minimis packages every single day. The loophole, not the only thing the president is ending. He's also revoked Secret Service detail for former Vice President Kamala Harris, saying her protection will end on Monday. The protection had been extended from 6 to 18 months by the Biden administration and would have ended in July of 2026. Now, typically, a former vice president's Secret Service protection lasts 6 months after leaving office. The move to drop the detail comes as the former vice president gets ready to launch a book. That's a tour that she's actually doing, a book tour for her new memoir titled 107 Days, which is scheduled to be released next month. Well, now to the Middle East, where Israel is declaring Gaza City a dangerous combat zone as its military begins its planned offensive on the famine-gripped area. The return to around-the-clock fighting is expected to displace thousands of Palestinians there. But the Israeli government argues that a widened offensive is the best way to bring the hostages home and cripple Hamas's capacity to launch future attacks.
We are not waiting. We have begun the preliminary operations and initial stages of the assault on Gaza City. We will deepen our strikes on Hamas and the other terrorist organizations, and we will not hesitate until we bring back all the hostages and dismantle Hamas both militarily and in terms of governance.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu maintains the military will launch its offensive while simultaneously pursuing a ceasefire. Meantime, Israel says its military has recovered the bodies of 2 hostages, including a man who was kidnapped from his home during the October 7th attack. Of the 50 remaining hostages in Gaza, Israel believes that only 20 could still be alive. According to health officials, the death toll in Gaza has now surpassed 63,000 people. Most of them are Palestinians. As the Gaza offensive does happen, Secretary of State Marco Rubio has revoked the visas of Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and 80 other officials ahead of next month's UN General Assembly, something the Palestinian Authority decried as being against international law. Palestinian representatives assigned to the UN mission, however, were granted exceptions. The State Department said in a statement that Rubio also ordered some new visa applications from Palestinian officials, including those tied to the Palestine Liberation Organization. He said those should be denied. President Abbas had been expecting to address the General Assembly, as he has done for many years, and attend a meeting about a 2-state solution, which calls for Israel living side by side with an independent Palestine. In another move, the State Department has also suspended a program that allowed injured Palestinian kids from Gaza to come to the U.S. for medical treatment. Well, the director of the CDC ousted by the Trump administration, and Texas redrawing the lines when it comes to voting districts. Lots of changes happening this week. We're talking with Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and Troy Mayor Ethan Baker for their perspectives. You're watching The Pulse here on Fox 2. Welcome back to The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. And this week, a lot of big news stories happening concerning all of those things. Joining us tonight to talk about some of those headlines is Democratic Congresswoman Debbie Dingell and the mayor of Troy, a Republican, Ethan Baker, even as the mayor is a nonpartisan role. But we thank you both for your perspective here tonight. It's always good to see you. Congresswoman, I heard you on a piece of what you had said on CNN earlier, worried that our democracy could be on fire. I thought that was an interesting comment that you made. In which circle of news are you speaking of when you say this, as we are drinking from a fire hose with the news?
Well, we were talking about redistricting, actually, as we were saying it. And look, I am somebody who believes in working across the aisle, treating everybody with respect. And I think, by the way, we've lost all boundaries and people are doing and saying things which just cross all lines. But having said that, what is happening with redistricting across the country, trying to stack elections, a president trying to take mail-in ballots away, which disenfranchises seniors, active military, those with disabilities, et cetera. At some point, you got to fight fire with fire.
But Congresswoman, wouldn't you say that the redistricting issue has been around as long as politics? I mean,
No.
we've been talking about this for a long time. It's happened under other administrations, including some Democrats, wouldn't you say?
It has never happened the way that it is happening now, where Donald Trump, President Trump, be respectful, is going into states and telling them that they must gerrymander and change districts because they're worried about losing the election next year. And the surest sign of that is this week when he said he wanted to rebrand what he calls the big, beautiful bill, and I have a lot of other adjectives I would use.
I know you do, and you've used a couple of those adjectives on this show, but I do want to ask you about the Texas redistricting and Ethan Baker, the mayor of Troy. When you look at this, I guess what I'm trying to say is that we know that gerrymandering's been around for a long time. We know people have been doing this a long time. I think the Congresswoman is making it clear that the way in which a president exercises his power in this case by going out in the way he did to do this is wrong. As a Republican, what do you think?
Yeah, but no, I respect what the Congresswoman has just said, and I think traditionally she's absolutely right. That's the way we've always done this in this country. Yes, there's redistricting every 10 years, and gerrymandering happens, but to have it happen kind of thrown upon certain states in the middle of a decade seems a little bit strange. So as a Republican, I respect the concept of, if this is a political game, if we're playing games to try to win at all costs, then what the president's doing makes a lot of sense to me, in all honesty. But it does really change the norms of what we're dealing with. And we talk about fighting fire with fire, but we all burn when we fight fire with fire, right? And I think that's what the Congresswoman's fear is when she makes those comments.
I want to talk for a moment about fire with fire, because Gavin Newsom actually has said this, the governor of California, which, by the way, we could have a whole conversation about the redistricting efforts that he would like to put into place to balance all of this out. But let's talk for a moment about what he's been doing. We talk about when they go high, when they go low, we go high, according to Michelle Obama. I've read a lot of interesting articles recently of people who are saying, this isn't the time to play that. We're going to go high. You need to go as low. And Gavin Newsom is doing that. What do you think about it?
First of all, I want to tell you, if I have one message that I've heard, people are worried about high costs, et cetera, but you know how many town halls I've done this month? People are mad. And they do think that we cannot unilaterally disarm ourselves. They are worried about the state of our democracy, and they want to see people fight. And look, in Michigan, I want to make clear, we do have the people spoke. We have a commission that does the redistricting every 10 years. We have fair and balanced seats in this state, and our congressional delegation reflects the presidential vote. But at some point, you can't just sit quietly while you watch democracy. We are watching freedom of speech, freedom of press.
So what do you think about Governor Gavin Newsom putting on a red hat saying Gavin Newsom was right about everything, tweeting back, or I guess social truthing everything back to President Trump of what he said, using his own language? Does that work?
Look, I don't like where we are, but I think you got to fight fire with fire, and I'm going to protect our democracy.
Let's talk for a moment about the powers of this president as they stand. The president saying, let's go ahead and take some of these federal efforts and put them into Chicago. You heard the governor today, Ethan Baker, say, not in my backyard. How much power does this president think he has versus how much he actually has to do the things that he wants to do?
A president has as much power as they take until they're stopped from taking it. That's the reality of our system, and that's not always the best way to look at it, but it's a reality, I think. So I think he feels like he's having some success in D.C. with what he's doing with the National Guard. I don't think it's the same equation in any other city in this country. We've talked a little bit before about how D.C. is different, right? There are federal people involved in the lawmaking in D.C. Going into Chicago is a little bit different. Again, I wouldn't like it if someone came into Troy and the president said, we're just sending troops there. On the flip side, people are terrified of crime. Regardless of the stats coming down or not, whatever stats you're looking at, it doesn't matter. If one person in the neighborhood has some kind of violent crime against them, that's what those people feel. And the Congresswoman, you spoke very much in 2016 and 2024 about, hey, remember what's going on. People don't always assume what you hear in the polls or the stats are what's right. And you spoke about it as it related to President Trump. It's the same thing with crime. It doesn't matter that the stats are going down. People are afraid. Crime remains an issue in this country. And, if they see National Guard on the streets, some people are going to feel really comforted by that.
Congresswoman, is that a problem that the Democrats had in terms of messaging when the Harris-Biden campaign said, you don't have to worry about your money. Our economy is doing fine. You don't have to worry about crime. There's no big crime issue. When, in fact, people felt differently than what these numbers are saying. Is there a dissonance there that these politicians need to listen to?
Look, I'm going to say several things. One, people want to be safe, and I say that to everybody. And safety is they want to be safe on the streets. They want economic safety. They want their job to be safe. People want to be safe, and we have to take that on. We got to hear it. And not everybody said. We all knew that the economy was a problem last year. People were paying too much at the grocery store. And by the way, their prices have gone up. Their utility costs that he promised to reduce 50% are going up, just as an aside. What I worry about is the militarization of law enforcement. We need policing in this country. People need to be safe. But our military is to protect us from enemies abroad. So we've got to be very careful about what is happening and how it is happening. But everybody, I don't care who you are, has a right to feel safe. We need to be investing. The president could be helping local levels of government who need help supporting their law enforcement.
So is there a better way to do this instead of militarizing, but rather give funds and policing help in some way to these cities that need it? Well,
a couple of things. The funds always come with strings, so it depends what strings those funds come with. I think the other aspect of it is it's been extremely difficult to hire police officers in this country.
It's a real issue.
Going back 5-10 years especially. It's a little better in the city of Troy, for example, but even in Troy, where we're not Detroit, we're not Baltimore, we're not D.C., Chicago with those levels of violent crime, it was a struggle for us to hire good quality police officers.
Sure.
So all the money in the world doesn't solve that problem. So perhaps, I understand the need of a National Guard helping out sometimes maybe isn't such a bad thing, but if there's a crime bill that comes out of D.C. that gives some funding to locals to help with that, yeah, I'm all for it if it's got the strings that are appropriate.
Mayor Ethan Baker and Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, great to see you both. Thank you for joining us here on The Pulse. We appreciate both your perspectives. So more to come, of course, on all these topics we're talking about. An ongoing conversation on this show every night. And now an ongoing conversation about cracking down on deepfakes. The new law signed in Michigan when it comes to AI and fake sexualized videos of real people. We're hearing from a tech expert on those protections. You're watching The Pulse on Fox 2. Welcome back to The Pulse, where we focus on all things people, power, and politics. And one thing we're seeing creep into all of those areas more these days, artificial intelligence. Well, it may be used to help in some cases. It can, like anything, it can also hurt. This week, Governor Gretchen Whitmer signing legislation making it a crime to create and distribute AI-created images or videos showing people in sexual situations. Joining us to talk about these types of issues, AI expert Brent Yaxon. It's always good to see you. Thanks for joining us, Brent, here on The Pulse tonight. All right, so the governor essentially signing into law something that many people said is long overdue. Break down what this law would do and what it would prevent.
So this law is similar to the federal law that passed in May of this year, which targets specifically fake content created through what we call deep fakes or through AI. The difference being with this one is it's focused on making these punishable charges for individuals. So it's criminal charges that we can direct at individuals now. So what it does is it gives local victims of some of these crimes a way to go through local law enforcement to actually have somebody get punished.
How easy has it been for people to create images in which they purport that someone is doing something sexual, for instance, in a video or a picture, and kind of doctor it and make people believe that that's actually what happened? Well, and how believable are they?
Over the last 5 years, that technology has been advancing more and more, and the access to that technology has been getting more broad, right? So now pretty much anybody who really wants to invest a little time in looking into this and how do I do it can do that now. And they're looking almost identical to real people, so it's very hard to tell the difference. So right now it's very easy to do it, unfortunately.
AI, for a few years in its infancy, it looked almost insanely ridiculous. I mean, the fact that someone had 6 fingers, or it looked like they were laughing at something that shouldn't be laughed at. Their faces didn't match the emotion of what was being said. That's all changed in the last year or two, and things look really convincing. Can you tell the difference between something that's fake and real with AI?
There are still ways to tell the difference, but I can tell you, even in the last 2 months, the releases that have been coming out through like Google Veo and some of the other ones, it's very challenging, even for me now, to tell the difference. Is there an effort right now by lawmakers to figure out a way to, watermark some of this video to figure out what's real and what's not? There's 3 federal bills that are kind of on hold right now for the House and Congress to come back, or the House and Senate to come back, that are specifically for that. It's identifying them with some kind of a marking, creating some transparency around what is AI, what are fakes, what are not, and how things are copied. They're just kind of on hold right now, and I hope some of them pass, although states are doing it as well. So California and New York have some legislation on that already, too. How important is that to you as someone who obviously values what AI can do for the good, for the bad stuff to be rooted out? We have to do it. It's really tarnishing, what AI can do. It's making everybody scared of something that could have a ton of potential. So we need to fix the laws. We need to get new laws in place. We need to mark things like this that are fake so that we can move forward. Speaking of scared, so many people are a little weary after hearing a report this week saying that AI will cost X number of jobs, and I don't want to put out the number because I believe that there are like 3 different studies that came out with 3 different numbers, but many thousand people will lose their jobs because of AI. One big company actually saying we're going to have to lay off a certain number of people because of it. Is there truth to this? I mean, do you think that's actually going to happen? What I can say is historically, technology has always created jobs. Over every single huge change from a technological perspective, you look at internet, you look at computers, everything, it has created jobs. And it's going to be the same with AI. Now, there will be some reskilling. There will be some retooling. People will need to learn different skill sets. But the vast majority will be a job growth, job creation. Now, I have heard the stories about layoffs. I haven't seen it in the U.S., though. Most of those companies are talking about foreign people that they have working in different locations that are doing certain skills, and they're getting rid of that entire team. But I also know that large companies here always have a different excuse for why they're laying off people. And every 10 years, it's different. So they may use AI as an excuse to say, hey, we have to lay off 30, 40,000 people, when in fact, they were planning on doing that anyways to cut costs. Right, and the company you're speaking of did that 10 years ago for the same reason. I want to ask you one last question with 30 seconds left. I know you're saying that there's going to be a gain with technology, as there has been in the past when it comes to jobs, but is there a short-term loss that happens before you get the gain? I don't think it's there yet. There might be, but we're still 5 or 6 years away from that from an AI standpoint. It still can't replace humans. There's no humanistic quality of it yet, and it's not very good without human help. No amount of time is going to be enough to really unpack all of it with you. So that's why we keep asking you back here on The Pulse. You do a great job unpacking some of this AI stuff that so many of us need clarification on. So Brent Yaggs, good to see you. Thanks for joining us on The Pulse tonight. Thank you, Rube. And that is The Pulse. We thank you so much for joining us. I'm Rube Faraj. As always, it was great to be with you.